Thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching this video. Today's June 19th. It's Father's Day in the US. And we're blessed to be joined with somebody I've come to know quite well and have been completely inspired by in her teachings and her moving through life. And her name is Jeanne Vargas. Welcome, Jeanne.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. And I also sometimes know Jeanne as Jeanne. So Jeannie, thank you again for being here. And we've already begun in a sense. And I'd like to just circle back to that, as we're going to be talking a little bit, and maybe more than a little bit, about how we meet pain and suffering in our lives as we age and grow older in particular. I had asked if you needed to do anything to be comfortable within meditation practice. And you were beginning to tell us how you discovered what you needed and how that came about. So I'm wondering if we could circle back to that and just pick right up and go from there.
I had to have accommodations so that I could allow my body to get in a relaxed position. I might need to been supported by lying down on a thick mat. When I went, I started to tell you, when I went to Spirit Rock for my first silent retreat, 7-day silent retreat, I couldn't have picked a better place because they had every accommodation there you could think of, and they encouraged you and supported you in being physically comfortable. It wasn't I saw that meditating in a group wasn't a race to see who could sit in a certain position for a certain period of time without moving, and that you really looked like you were meditating. It was meditation for everyone is different in a sense that for me, I found with managing some moderate, sometimes pain, is to just be able to pause and be quiet, allowing all of my systems in my body to just take a pause and settle down. And I'm very fortunate that I'm able. My heart slows right down, like really scary low. And to my doctors, they're just amazed at how low my heart rate will go. And I use that to an advantage because I can really collect myself then and achieve a sense of well-being. And I can do it as often as I need to, as I said, in a day, in an hour, and even a moment. And what's so wonderful about this is that many times people don't even know I meditate. And I love to teach this to my participants in my classes. I feel that was that checking in exercise that we teach is the most beneficial thing that you can teach someone. Yeah, so you may need accommodations like soft cushions. You might need to lie down. You might need to sit with your legs elevated, not flat on the floor. Whatever you need is what you need. And I think if you're teaching a class, you need to be aware that you don't know where your students are coming from, and you don't know how their body is feeling, but to try to accommodate them. in the best way you can, and encourage them to try to find the words to explain what they need in that moment. You know how when we're learning yoga and we have a good yoga teacher that will go around and seems to know just where to put the blocks, seems to know where we need a little support on our body so we can get the most benefit from that stretching exercise. Well, that's what I think the mindfulness teacher needs to be there to do too.
You know, that's wonderful, because very often in our sessions, the voice that's been going out has been teacher to teacher, views from the field. And being on the Sing to the Mountain studio, we have a lot of people watching who may be new to meditation. So in what you just said, you've covered what it's like for a participant, what it's like to teach it. And I think that can be very helpful for people to hear. So I'm curious where in your life you first discovered meditation and how that might have interplayed with prayer and your faith.
1989, I was living and working in Chicago, and I attended the Unity of Oak Park Church. Unity is a non-denominational organization, church organization. I think they're located somewhere near Kansas City, or I'm trying to think of where they are, but they're in the state of Kansas. I've never visited their center of worship there, but I went to Unity of Oak Park and I absolutely loved it. We had meditation every Monday night. And that's where I first meditated. And we would sit on the floor. It was, I'm trying to think of who the most beautiful, it wasn't a church like, a huge cathedral kind of thing. It was in a home that had been made into a church. And I can't think of who the architect was. He's designed a number of homes in the Chicago area. It's beautiful stained glass windows and everything. So the rooms were very spacious, and we were all sitting on the floor, and they would put something like a candle or a glowing ball. We could draw our focus to that and then just sit. And then after we meditated, we could say what came up for us. And there were spiritualists that belonged to that group. And they would talk about what they saw. I called them aberrations. It was mind-boggling. It was we just woke you up and just said, oh my goodness, this is wonderful. And I really loved the way I felt. So that was my first introduction. And then I stayed with that meditation since then. Began reading Jon Kabat-Zinn in 1989.
So you've gone on to write extensively about meditation and mindfulness, and it continues to move in ways through your life that you use to inspire others through your writing and your teaching. And you have a master's in social work?
No, my master's is not in social work.
Oh, okay.
My master's degree is in education. I have an undergraduate degree, an advanced degree. I missed my master's in social work by 1 year.
Oh.
And I still think about going back and finishing it. What happened, my mother was ill, and we had just circumstances in life. And then as it turned out, I had done my internship at a West Side inner city hospital in Chicago. and I worked as an intern in the emergency room, and that I really had such an experience there. Over and over again, people come many times, the same patients coming in with the same problem. What I said I needed to do at that time was to go back and to learn how to teach people how to think. And what I did is I enrolled in a master's program for it was human resources training and development. And what I actually learned how to do was to teach people how to do things. And I wrote my master's thesis by going to a woman's treatment center in Chicago, where women who were drug addicts were able to go with their small babies and small toddlers. And the children stayed with them as they went through the treatment program. And then I created a adult basic education program and a GED program for them, so that they could begin to complete their education and recover from their addiction. And also had a program where the children were involved in learning too, with the mothers. And at that same time, then we had the first Gulf War, and I had worked as a refugee coordinator in Vietnam after the Vietnam War, and I resettled refugees in Iowa. And I was called to open a refugee service center in Chicago on Devon Street. And I hired 26 caseworkers, counselors, and homemakers. I got about $650,000 worth of contracts from the Department of Children and Family Services to pay for my staff. And we had three different units. We had the people that provided service to 312 families a year for casework and case management of families that were involved with Department of Children and Family Services in cases of abuse and neglect. And then we had the caseworkers and counselors too, which we used, working with the refugees. And we had translators, and we had people who would help our customers or our clients come in who are applying for refugee status to enter the country, or bring family members in from Iraq, Afghanistan, all different countries that were involved in that war. And I worked with about a few prisoners of war that were brought in from that were Iraqis that were brought in as prisoners of war, to get them resettled. And then at that time, I'd had my ties with the mental health people and my social work friends. I was involved in the field as well as in administration. So that was my project. I never went back to social work. I finished my master's degree, and yeah, that's where I was. And I felt I found the skills then, which better equipped me to be a social worker, in the sense that I could help people to be able to figure out what it was that they needed to stabilize themselves, so that they could be independent and self-sufficient. And that's the goal, you know.
Are you still in touch with any of the refugees that you met back then?
Yeah, because I spent time going to ethnic communities in Chicago. My work that I did, it just involved so many kinds of refugees, not just the refugees from Iraq and Afghanistan, but also from Russia, Jews that came in. And then I had already done, I had to work to make a living before I had my nonprofit and the Refugee Service Center. And I was a curriculum designer for Chicago City colleges. And I designed the ESL curriculum with a civics component to prepare people when they were coming into this country. So so many people lived here for 25 years and never were citizens. So they worked and made money in this country, but they couldn't draw their Social Security. So I went around to different ethnic communities, the Assyrians, the Russian Jews, and the Arabs on the south side of Chicago, and set up service centers where they could come and learn to speak English. They could get instruction to prepare them to take the exams to naturalize or to become citizens in this country, and also to be able to connect with resources in the community to help pay their electric bill, help them with domestic violence or whatever else. So yeah, I was pretty busy, and going back to college and finish my master's degree and getting my license to be a social worker wasn't high on my agenda of things to do. And I regret that now.
So you have an extended family through them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they became like brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles.
So then somewhere along the way, you decide to formalize mindfulness training. Did that begin going to UMass or some other way?
Well, what happened with that? I had a lot of health issues and physical problems, and I was a patient at the Spine Center at the University of Iowa. And in 2014, I had to go through the Spine Center for the first time, and they sent me to, physical therapy, see the orthopedic doctor, also see the clinical psychologist. I said, that is offensive to me. I'm a social worker. I know everything about mental health. I'm not nuts. I have real pain. But this clinical psychologist said to me, Jeanne, you really ought to study mindfulness, and you ought to learn how to use mindfulness-based stress reduction to help you with the anxiety associated with pain. And I was truly offended. And so I took the flyer that she gave me for Bob Stahl's book, mindfulness-based stress reduction, a self-study handbook, and I took it home and buried it in my desk. And then the second time my doctor sent me to the Spine Center, once again, I went to see the clinical psychologist, and she asked me if I ever bought the book. And I said, I probably will now. And I did. I went home and bought it, and immediately saw the value of it. This was about August of 2000. No, this must have been about June of 2016. And then I went through Bob's Elisha Goldstein's program, which is very much the 8-week program in a handbook. Tremendously changed my life. And one day I went for confession, and the priest said to me, boy, you have really changed. I see you're here in Mass every Sunday morning, and you seem happy and you're smiling. And I said, yes. And the biggest change is, you see, at that time, I was taking about 200 hydrocodone tablets a month. And I was also, I had, prior to that in 2012, been not only on 200 hydrocodone tablets a month, but I was also on fentanyl patches from 2001 until 2012 that I changed every 3 days. And then for breakthrough pain, I had hydromorphone. So all I did was sleep. So when in 2012, by a twist of fate, I gave up the fentanyl patches, I began to wake up from the drug stupor I was in. I was no longer eating breakfast and falling asleep in a chair at maybe 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then waking up about 1:30 when my personal assistant would say, look, I'm going to go home pretty soon here, Jeanne. If you need to go to the pharmacy or the grocery store, you better get up and get going, because I'll have to leave you. And so I would, and then I'd get done whatever I had to get done and go back and sit in my chair and fall asleep because I was really drugged. But in 2012, I gave up the fentanyl, and then I gave up 6 weeks later, stopped taking the hydromorphone tablets. So then I still had 200 hydrocodone tablets. That's a lot of hydrocodone. I was taking the highest dose you could take every 6 hours round the clock. And then in 2014, two things changed. I woke up to mindful awareness and the mindfulness practices. And the second thing was the laws changed, so the doctors could no longer write prolifically huge quantities of hydrocodone drugs for you. So I had to go from 200 pills down to 65 pills a month. And I didn't know if I could do that or not. But my mindfulness-based stress reduction, my meditation, and learning to think differently about my thoughts, feelings, and emotions gave me the strength and ability to be able to make that change. And I was, by 2015, you see, and remember when I said in 2014, I was introduced to MBSR and I rejected it thinking, what can that do for me? And then in 2015, having experienced it and then wanting to get into it more. So when I sat in the priest's office and we had just finished with my confession and reconciliation and all that, then he said, well, I just want to tell you, I'm just amazed at how well you're doing. And he said, what are you doing? And I told him about mindfulness-based stress reduction. And then he said, could you bring that to my church? And I said, I would love to, because see, I was a trained teacher. I didn't tell you, I also taught alternative high schools on alternative education on the south side of Chicago. And while I was in graduate school, and I was very good at being able to set up the instructional materials. So I used Bob's book and I did that. And then because I was so concerned that I might not be teaching it the right way, and my husband said to me, if you want to go to Massachusetts and start studying this, I will work extra hours so you can go. And he did. And I mean, you know how expensive that education was. I went out to UMass. I started the 3rd of January, and I met Bob Stahl with my very first class. And Bob was just great about accommodating all of the 115, I think there were 115 of us that were at that class, accommodating us to meditation as a group in that first encounter with the real people who are teaching the fundamental teachings of John Kabat-Zinn and mindfulness-based stress reduction. And then once I got there, I was so driven to want to finish this. I said, I need to know everything and I need to do this right because I can have an impact on people here. And I don't want to misguide them. So I need to know how to do this right.
I've known you to have great integrity in your attention to learning and exploring mindfulness practices and the teaching of MBSR. You know, Steve Hickman, in our last recording, mentioned how we all stand on each other's shoulders. And I was blessed to eventually mentor you when you joined the UCSD program for a time, UCSD Center for Mindfulness. And little did I realize at that time how I would grow to know you and feel like I was standing on your shoulders in many moments of my life as I encounter my own suffering and the suffering of others around me. You know, we all know suffering and we all experience the suffering of our participants in our classes. And maybe in some way, we become teachers so that we can get closer to that suffering and know more about it for ourselves. But you have taught me so much in the way you have faced the adversity, the challenges, the difficulties of aging, and you've been quite open about it publicly, at least on social media. And I'm wondering if you'd be open to sharing a little bit about some of what you continue to go through with this body.
You know, one of the most wonderful teachings that we have is the understanding of the stories of the mind, Alan. The stories of the mind and how they shape us, and how these stories that we all have, stories of the mind that we make up to help us explain why things are the way they are and why we do the things we do. And of course, then we have stories that explain why, that we are explaining why other people are doing the things they do. And when I started getting into this, I said, oh my God, I have been such a prisoner to stories of the mind. And that is the most wonderful thing, to be able to, I see it like I've been in a bird cage all my life. And because I'm supposed to be a certain way, I'm supposed to do things a certain way and think a certain way and act a certain way. And then when I don't, then I'm not meeting the norms and I'm a deviant. And, you know, people get locked into that. And then all of a sudden they realize, my God, I'm so sorry. So we start peeling back where these come from. Where do we believe the things we do? You know, where do we get these perceptions? And looking at, oh, I just loved all that. That was just so helpful to me to be able to look at where I was. So when you're meeting adversity, I had probably, like everybody else, is trying to figure out what is their purpose for being here, and are they enough? Should they be different, have more education, have a better job, have a better home situation, whatever, you know, we're always looking for, that's what's going to make us comfortable, you know, and getting to realize that these are all, you know, stories of the mind. So some of the adversity that I'd made in my, had to meet in my life early on was, I was a child who my mother gave up at 15 days of it, after my birth, because she couldn't handle me. And come to find out, I was an illegitimate child. She was married when she had me, but then she just couldn't be comfortable with me. And so I was kind of, my aunt raised me. And then at a certain age, when I was ready to start school, I went home to my mother. So I never really felt like I belonged. And then I became ill. So now we know of the traumatic childhood events, these how this accumulates, these traumatic incidents and events accumulate in the body, and in the tissue, in the joints, and how the body can already have genetically predisposition to have certain conditions or diseases. I had those preconditions for certain conditions, physical conditions, diseases, but with the stress and the trauma, it actually manifests. And by the time I was 25, they diagnosed me with systemic lupus erythematosus. And then with that, a lot of, had chronic kidney disease by the time I was 25, and 4 children under the age of 5. So a lot of things happened to me during my life, then my health deteriorated. One of the things that I was so fortunate to have was a good, well, you could say it was a good mind, but it got me into a lot of trouble sometimes. But I was always able to say, okay, now this is where I'm at. This is, I have this illness. I can do these things, but I can't do some of those things. So how am I going to navigate my way through life? And I always had, maybe because my aunt instilled this in me, you can always begin again. She used to say, with the dawn of a new day, it's a new slate, you can always begin again. And then I learned with my mindfulness, you don't have to wait till the next new day. You can begin again in the very next breath. And that is wonderful for me. I think it is for everybody. So I love to teach that too. No matter what you were, what you did, what happened to you a moment ago, let's sit with that. Now let's just take a deep breath, let it go. Oh, how that feels so good. Now, really take that deep breath, let your shoulders relax, let your jaw relax, let the tongue relax in your mouth, let your ears relax. Just take that deep breath. Really feel it filling your lungs right down here. Not your throat, not a shallow breath, but really a deep breath. And then let it out. Maybe you're going to have to do that 2 or 3 times. Oh my God. Just feel that relief. Now, take a deep breath. Now, what do you think you can do? Now, where can you go? Using the abilities that you have, what can you do to fly again, to rise like a phoenix from the ashes if you have to, and go? And so, I found as I got older, more things, more problems developed. I'm 74 years old now. And they just discovered this past January that I really have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which explains a lot of things, in addition to other problems. Like now I have diastolic heart failure. I have still the chronic kidney disease. I have a history of type 2 diabetes. But I learned how. I found out as much as I could about those diseases and conditions. What do you eat? How do you take your medicine? What is the medicine for? I read everything I could get my hands on, and having worked in research in undergrad when I was a student in college, I was so fortunate to be able to work at a medical school at the University of Illinois. So I got into real serious science-based double-blind research. So I knew how to look at research articles and synthesize it. And I still use that. I still read everything I can get my hands on so I can talk intelligently with my doctor about treatment options. And I can actually, but thanks for God, I still have my wits about me and I can do that. But it all comes back to, again, we get overwhelmed with the condition, with the diagnosis, with the prognosis, but we still have to put all that aside and say, what is here for me now? What is it that I have to do to get through this moment? What do I have to do to get through this morning, this afternoon, this day? In addition to looking at your physical condition and your emotional condition and mental condition, you also have bills to pay. rent to pay house payments and stuff. So you have to try to find balance in everything. And that's where I say you have to sit with it all. I say over and over again, when the most pressure you have on you, when you feel so overwhelmed that you don't think anything more worse can happen, you sit with that and invite that in. Oh, bring all that terrible stuff to me. Let me sit with it all. And you find well, for instance, I was introduced to that guest house,
Mhm.
the poem "The Guest House" that Rumi wrote. And I said, oh my Lord, that is what happens every moment. And I often write about that. And that was, how did I get into writing? Well, you see, I had very little luck with having MBSR classes. I had a beginner's luck. First, I would fill the class. Oh, I had a lot of people in my classes at the Catholic Church. And then when I broke off on my own, it was getting harder to get. And then when I was good at teaching it, and the word got around that I was teaching it, then we had people coming up saying, oh my God, she's taking people away from church and she's bringing them to Buddha. And I had to defeat, remember that, Ellen? We went through
I
that.
do.
It was really awfully hard for me. And so that's what led me to develop my program on social media. And what I did is I created three different pages. You might have come across them, maybe not. One is called Mindfulness in everydayliving.com. The other one was I Wanted It to Be Love. And then on those pages, what I would do is I would write about how I was using mindfulness in my life by looking at my life's problems, and I don't mind sharing my horrifying sometimes experiences with people so that I could drive a point home. And there was another thing too, which I had to borderline on, and that was kind of scary. So I noticed this first when I was a student in social work at Jeanne at the University of Illinois in Chicago, that a lot of people in my class had terrible home lives. They had horrible childhoods. And we were all going into social work. And I thought, oh my God, how are we going to help anybody else when we're such messes ourselves? And then I remember when I was at Spirit Rock and I sat with Rick Hansen in a small group, and I'm listening to clinical psychologists. It was medical doctors. There were engineers. There were people from all walks of life, very well educated people, very degreed people. And their lives were just horrifying. And I thought, oh my God, they haven't been able to get themselves out of that terrible mess they're in. And they are treating others with prescription medication. Oh my God. And so it's very, very important for us as social workers, as MBSR teachers, as mindfulness, self-compassion teachers, as any kind of teachers. We see the problem in ourselves, but we think that we can solve other people's problems. We can't solve our own problems, but we know when we've gone through our training with MBSR, mindfulness, mindful self-compassion, mindfulness, self-balance, all the different kind of mindfulness programs and certifications you can get. The basic thing is, how do you look at your life? How do you get down with your problems? To be able to articulate what your problems are. How do you feel? What are your resources? What are your options? And to be able then pause every time you need to, more often than you even realize. Stop, think, pause, see clearly, now move forward. We use our own personal experiences. I have used my experiences because I can say I did, this was what was going wrong in my life, and I did this, and this is what my result was. And that was I think that worked for me, and I'm wondering if it wouldn't work for you. So then on my pages on social media, I share that. And then I began getting people who were writing their comments, and they were telling me their story. So I wasn't fixing them. They were being able to articulate their situation. They were beginning to find words. Maybe I was helping them to discover those words, or even to look closely at that emotion or that feeling. And then they were being able to see, oh, a light bulb's kind of going on in their heads. I'm not doing it to them. They read my story. They're thinking about their story, and they see, oh, I know what I need to do. Just getting them to stop and read, to stop ruminating, and then take an action after they have allowed themselves to collect themselves and be able to put actually be able to find the way to describe it and to see step by step what they could do. I tell the stories over and over again. It's always the same story. Basically, it's not the same story. I mean, it's the same way to get out of trouble. It's the same way to try to liberate yourself and to find balance in your life. And I just love it. So while I couldn't fill an 8-week class with people here in chairs in front of me, I have effectively touched the lives of tens of thousands of people on social media all over the world in other languages. I use Google to translate into Spanish, Portuguese. Portuguese I translated into Arabic, and I still have people following me from all over the world.
You're giving everybody, and for me right now, that yeah, there are 8-week programs, but in some way we become something through teaching that 8-week program that's far bigger than being the teacher of a program, and how we then go on to take that and move through our life and touch others with it. So thank you, Jeanne. There's so much, and I'm so grateful for your profound sharing. I think if I could say one word that lands on me, it's resilience, that you bring through your life experience and how you persevered through it. So I'd like to leave it at this just for the sake of time.
Yeah, it comes down to wanting to build strength and resilience, Ellen, because that's how we can survive. That's how we can go on with our life. That's how we find the ability to be able to move forward. And very grateful to you, having mentored me all these years, and very grateful to the other teachers and the other people who come together on our Sunday mornings too. So thank you very much for having this opportunity to reach you all. And I invite you, I can invite you to read and share, because people who come to the social media pages also can share their story and their experience, and they teach us, and they teach each other, and they teach themselves, and that's what life's about. Thank you very much, Alan.
Click down below to join our Mindfulness Teacher Community Facebook group, where you're also invited to post and share. Also, subscribe to Sing to the Mountain Studio so you don't miss out on future recordings of live sessions.